Okay, it's recording. I'm Linda Kornberg,
I'm Tammy Carson.
and we are here to do our Google Hangouts concerning our final, watching the movie Amazing Grace. So we'll start with question number one. What doctrine in Wilbur's heart drove him to advocate? And the bullet points I have is Wilbur had a great belief in humanity. He has the belief that God created men equal. He abandoned the he abhorred
Support. Yep.
treatment of the slaves that the slaves received, denounced those who kept slaves so that they could benefit financially from the slave labor, and he was a family man and could see the impact of slavery on their family units.
Those are great thoughts. Yeah, because it also says on here, why is the doctrine of family so important to have in your heart to be passionate and persistent? And I think it's interesting because that was what Wilbur represented, was heart.
Mm-hmm.
He represented having passion because he truly believed that God found him. And then as his friends directed him to, that means take action, that the whole base, like you said, of equality for people, sanctity of life, liberty, loyalty, compassion, all matched with that, the passion in his heart for advocating. And he saw inequality everywhere he looked in his society, which was very prevalent. And the people living with privileges that others didn't have were wrong, that was not okay. And that passion carried him through his whole life. Because I don't know if you read it at the end, but it was saying
Yeah.
that he went on to advocate for other things and make great change in
Education and prison reform
yeah,
and healthcare.
yeah. Man, next time I go to London, I want to go to Westminster Abbey. That's where he's buried, next to that prime minister friend. I'm like, I
Yeah.
don't know. That's
So
so
when I did my bullet points, if she had two questions in one
yeah.
question,
Oh,
I
you split.
separated them into two,
Okay.
just so that I covered, even though they were kind of related, I
Yeah.
into so that I covered everything.
Okay.
So the things I put under the second part, the doctrine of the family, why is it so important to have that in your heart? I put that the doctrine is necessary to have planted in your heart so as to continue on in the fight when failure seems to be the norm.
Yeah.
And without conviction, there's no passion or determination in the fight. And if your heart isn't fully committed, you don't fully know what you're fighting for.
I agree. Absolutely.
Okay, so I'll read the next one, then you can go first on it. Um, how did Wilbur employ a theoretical Brenner approach to become an effective advocate? Identify at least one thing in each system and be specific.
Okay. I have to get to that. It's a long list. So I don't have to read it all, right? Because it's really long. Okay. So at the micro level, which my understanding is that's individuals and their families. It can extend, to like work and school and peers. So on a micro level, he had individuals that he met with and got information from and discussed things with, people that he went to and sought out help and support, and including John Newton, who was the retired captain of the slave ship. That was one of the first things he did, was he went to an individual that he admired and wanted advice. And then he learned to go to all individuals and get their story. In the Meso system, which really is what helps individuals within the microsystem interact with the exosystem. So it's the facilitating system. He had a committee, and there were members from the micro level and the macro level within that committee. So it facilitated the ability to work within the macro system in the government and to go backwards and work into the microsystem of touching individuals. And also a person on that committee was, I can't say his name, but then at the end it said otherwise known as Gustav the Slave. So that man, Equano, I think, he was part of that mesosystem committee. Then he went back and touched people on a micro level with his book that he wrote. He wrote that book and then individuals got it. And so every member of that committee was part of that mesosystem that helped. And including like Lord Fox, who got on their side and then helped facilitate things.
Just a question in there. The one group that when he first met with the group, it said that 15 out of the 16 were his relatives.
Oh,
remember
wow.
That part? I put that in the mesosystem just because it was intriguing that that's where his first collection of people were from, was his relatives.
How did I miss that? Was it in the movie?
Yeah.
Okay, well.
Very briefly.
Okay, just a brief, yeah. Well, yeah, because that man that he's with, and I don't know if I got his name written down, that was kind of like a doctor for him, was Cousin. He called him Cousin.
Right.
Yeah. And then I feel like one of the big facilitators for that mesosystem piece was William Pitt, his friend that became prime minister, because he sort of brought everybody together that then was the catalyst for it moving forward. He saw that Wilbur could fulfill that spot and had the passion.
Him out specifically.
Yeah, yeah. So in the exosystem, which would be like, in this case, they didn't really have social services, but industry, local politics, neighbors, all of that. He found people that were in the House of Commons and were representatives, and he reached out to them. Like, he wrote to representatives that were over individual towns or ports and met personally with them and invited them to meetings and showed them evidence and tried to get them on board. And two of those, I think, were, oh yeah, I wrote that down again. Lord Fox, he was really a part of that. So the macro system being culture, history, laws, economics. And I kind of saw the House of Commons and Parliament as being part of the exo and the macro system. But the House of Commons is the macro system as far as that's where the bill had to be brought forth to. There was nothing that could be done without a bill being passed. And that's where he brought evidence to over and over and over again. He didn't give up. He kept going. And that's how he interacted with the macro system there. So, and other people within it. He got other people within that macro system to, like Lord Fox signed the petition, and he knew he had to influence and have other people to influence within that macro system. And that's also where they eventually brought the first bill that helped end slavery, which had nothing to do with slavery, but had to do with the ships and which flag they were flying. It was awesome. Because that lawyer found that like loophole. So that was how he interacted with the macro. And the Chronos system is not really, I don't think that's something that his influence there was indirect, because it took a lot of time for people to see how to change this. Because I bet there were people who understood it was wrong, but they didn't know how to change it. They didn't know how to change an entire Chronos system of how they operate, how they think, what their history is. So that, I almost feel like, is something we can look back and see how he influenced and how he changed people's opinions and steered them towards humanity and compassion. Those are my thoughts.
Okay, and mine were basically the same, except for and this might not be accurate, but for the exosystem, I put down one of the things that he did was being part of that little get together on the Madagascar, the slave ship, with all of the elite people, and
Yeah.
trying to anyway, teaching them how, getting them involved by talking to them about what happened on the ship and having them smell it. And then all of a sudden it was like the light started coming on in their brains. So I felt like that was an ecosystem that he influenced.
I agree. Absolutely. That was powerful.
It was. I was impressed with it.
Made it more real.
Right. How did Wilbur and his fellow advocates do and share their research? And then I waited till the next part to do the what evidence did they provide, which kind of all falls together. But so my first part, how did he and his fellow advocates do and share their research? Wilbur and his associates spread out across the country to gather evidence for Parliament. And they probably did that several times, with each time that it failed in their House of Commons or whatever.
Yeah.
They talked to men who had worked on the slave ships and to doctors who had treated them. They spoke to slaves themselves who had been whipped and branded. Mr. Equinos published his account of his years as a slave and sold 50,000 copies in the first 2 months. Wilbur said, and I quote, because I brought up the transcript of the movie because that helped me to.
I'm going to have to do that too. Yeah.
Yeah. But this quote, please, perhaps we should begin this journey with the first step. We are talking about the truth, so we should hand it out to people. Drop it from church roofs, paint pictures of it, write songs about it, make bloody pies out of it. I thought that was a good wrap up of what they tried to do. And then James Stephen went to the Indies and brought back diagrams, first-hand accounts, and transcripts of the trials where innocent Africans were found guilty of crimes they did not commit. And he had pages and pages of first-hand accounts, figures, and statistics.
Yeah, and I have kind of all that same stuff. How did they do their research? I noticed that in the beginning, they gave themselves a time frame within. They were like, a year from now, we're going to give ourselves a year to collect this evidence. And I noticed that got them moving. They weren't stalling because they they said, we have a year. This is where I also put, well, that's probably the next question. Yeah, so I think you hit all the points that I have here.
How did you see them? What evidence did they provide to persuade those opposing or on the fence?
Right, and you talked about this, but when he brought those MPs and merchants and their wives on the ship and then pulled the slave ship up alongside of it, that was one of the ways he persuaded. Mm-hmm. And he talked about.
What does that mean? What does it stand for?
MP?
You know? Yeah.
I do. Let me think. I can look it up.
Well, I can look it up too. I just
Minister of Parliament.
Okay.
So it's essentially like we would say a senator or a
congressman.
Yeah.
Okay.
And he talked about that day. He talked about how many had died. Like, this is how many living souls got on the ship, and this is how many were alive when it reached the shores. And he demonstrated the death and decay firsthand for them. I think another thing that he did was they brought all of that research to Parliament.
Mm-hmm.
The petition, I loved how the petition rolled out along the floor. That was awesome. I'm like, that's like, oh, I have that later. That's like the title of liberty. But the testimonials that they gathered it was smart the way they did it because they were from doctors and
Mhm.
slave ships who had firsthand accounts. And then they shared those directly with people in any format that they could.
With the chains, and I don't remember what part this happened in, but where they had the chains, they showed how they put it around their necks.
That was at the first dinner when the one that William Pitt had seemed like William Pitt set it up and brought together all these people to introduce to Wilbur. And it was, let me find his name, Thomas Clarkson, who took he pushed all the food aside and he
Yeah,
put the chains on the table. That was so powerful. I was like, that is a visceral way to show evidence.
yeah.
Oh, and another thing is that they tried to educate peoples and shop owners about what free trade sugar was.
Hmm.
That was another thing I felt like they did to persuade opposers.
And he also had that box built. It represented. He came out of it in the kitchen.
Yes.
It represented the area that a slave would stay in for 3 weeks
Yeah.
in their chains.
Gosh. Oh.
Seems so horrific to think of mankind actually being capable of doing that to another person.
I know. And the justification for it keeping going was, well, our economy will fall apart.
Yeah. Yep. All
Okay.
based on the old economy.
How'd you do it in the first place? How did the first group of people ever enslave someone like that?
Yeah.
I didn't understand.
And treat them so horribly that, and I don't know that it seemed like all of Wilbur's servants were white, didn't it?
Yeah, I didn't see any
Didn't have
black
slaves.
ones.
Yeah.
Uh-uh.
Okay, so the next question, what evidence, oh, no, we did that one. How does the film portray the importance of working together as a group? And you can go first on this one, Tammy.
Okay. Yeah, I'm trying to find the name of the book that we read with the man who was an advocate who went to the UN. Why am I having a hard time finding that in my notes?
Oh, brother, what's that book we write? A Sacred Duty?
Yeah. I remember what week we did that.
Oh, it was right in the middle.
Yeah.
Brother, can't remember his name.
I know I'm sure it's like in my Penzu journals and stuff.
Yeah.
And I don't want to keep like holding us up looking for it. But okay, so I feel like this demonstration of how important it is to work together as a group was very similar. It followed the same principles of the fact that encouragement from others is necessary to keep going as an advocate, and that you have to find people that you have common principles and values with, who believe in you and who believe in the cause, and surround yourself with those people. William Pitt, again, was a good friend who saw, I loved when William Pitt said, we're too young to realize certain things are impossible, so we do them anyway. And then I thought I had it written right here, but he also said something about you can have faith and action. Those aren't the exact words he said, and I'm going to have to find that. But basically,
Right.
do you think that feel like God has found you means you're going to isolate yourself, or are you going to do something with that? So,
And then the lady at the dinner said, we think you can do both.
right. Yes. Whatever that term was that they used. Yeah. We think you can do both. And that's so important in having a group that you're working with in advocacy. And there were similar people in his life to the brother in Sacred Duty. Like his wife was really similar, that is it Wilkinson? Is that, or Wilkins, Brother Wilkins? Anyway, his wife
Wilkins, I think it was. Yeah.
his wife was his support, and this Barbara who fell in love with him and they got married, she was the same thing for him and reminded him who he was and what his purpose was and what he was doing there. Yeah, those are the thoughts I have written on that part of the question.
I just had one other one. I hadn't gotten very far in this one. Was that they collected into their group people who would stop buying sugar. That seemed to be a theme throughout not throughout it, but it was mentioned several times how that act kind of drew together a group of people with a common interest. It was some action they could take, whether they were going to the House of Commons or whatever, they could stop using the sugar and still be a part of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
An act. Yeah.
If I skip over, if I go too fast, just tell me to stop.
Okay.
So the next one. Oh, I think we did that one. How did the film portray? Oh, the importance of working. What has family advocacy group work taught you? My answers were basically the same, just that one individual can start a movement, but working with other like-minded individuals gives strength to the cause. More people means more ideas of how to accomplish the desired outcome. Yeah. And strengths of one individual might be a weakness for another. And that was like Brother Wilkins' situation. Yeah. They had some that were really at the UN that were good at doing research on the internet, while he was great at doing the talks, but they helped him write the talk. And the lady was good about just organizing everybody into the cause. So those are the ones I've come up with so far.
Yeah, I agree. Around. Well, and I think if you look at each character in the film, and you could write an entire paper just about that, how each character in the film complemented his weaknesses with their strengths, and how I feel like over this semester, as we've met as a group every week, that is what happens for me. Every week, the things that I can't quite figure out or articulate or understand, but I feel passionate about the topic, when we meet and discuss things, by the end of it, someone's strengths have bolstered me, and I can put into words more effectively what it is I'm feeling and thinking.
And we had a really wide range of age and situation, and background as well, to bring to the table. And I think that's what group work has taught me as well, is just the benefit of having more minds working on the same cause, but maybe from a different direction.
Yeah. And his committee in the film was that way, because they were very different personalities, and that helped him.
That was good. Okay, what parallels do you see between Wilbur and Captain Moroni in Alma 46? And I'll let you go ahead.
Okay. Well, I mentioned it earlier, but that petition that they took to the Parliament and rolled out on the floor was like a title of liberty. It was symbolic throughout the whole movie of the fact that he heard the call from God and he had the vision and the passion, and then he went out and he created a symbol for that cause and got others to follow their inclinations by jumping on the cause, jumping in the fray of the cause and following it. And he, Moroni, that's what Moroni did. And Moroni believed that God had called him, and Wilbur believed that God had found him and called him. And then also Moroni gathered people from all over the country to follow that cause and get behind the title of liberty. And Wilbur did that same thing. So those are my thoughts.
Let's see. I put several things on this one. Both Wilbur and Moroni had compassionate hearts towards other people. And that enabled them to do what they did. Both men turned to God in prayer for guidance, like when he was laying out in the wet grass and saying, I feel I have to do this in secret. But so you knew that he prayed. They didn't have to go any farther with that, but you just knew that he prayed. There was one part in the scriptures that say, and crying with a loud voice. And I think Captain Moroni did that when he was trying to get the people to come and follow him. And I really think Wilbur did, because at times he really got loud, like even in front of his soon-to-be wife. I think it was before. Effective advocate is tenacious, as were Wilbur and Captain Moroni. A Christian and professional family advocate. Was that part of the question?
Yeah.
Somewhere professional, anyway. Want to change the world and make it a better place. And both of them had that desire to broaden their sphere of who they were touching.
Yeah.
And an advocate for a worthy cause can serve God and be involved in politics. And I don't know that Captain Moroni was necessarily involved in politics, but he was the leader. So you kind of looked at that as a politician. And Wilbur has a future in politics, but then starts to be drawn to God. He was told by William Pitt that Christianity leads to action as well as meditation.
That was the quote. Yep. I love that.
Yeah, that was it.
I also put in the part about professional and Christian that the work of God and the work of an activist can be done at the same time. And I remember we talked about that back in the week we watched the videos with the young man speaking out against gay marriage, and he only used God's laws, and he did not seek to understand or use components of laws that exist or anything else to relate to it. Wilbur never did that. Even though he was passionate and people called him the preacher or whatever they called him, he always used he found a professional way to work within the laws and still be a Christian advocate. So I thought that was pretty powerful.
Okay. The next one, I know there was one question that had that about how can you be an advocate and or a Christian and a professional advocate. Anyway, I don't know where that question is.
I think that was right in that same one, because it says, what is a Christian and professional family advocate, and how did Wilbur exemplify it? That was the one. That was right in the middle of the two questions we just talked about.
Okay.
Yeah.
The next question then is, how can you be effective and Christ-like against such loud and often degrading voices? And I think just like Wilbur, the first praying to God for help and to not join in with the loud and degrading voices, but to stand up for what you know is true without lowering yourself to their level. And that's as far as I got on that one.
Well, and I feel like I don't know. I feel like I answer some of those later with a couple other questions. So I'll have to figure out how to come back and answer it there, because I feel like the reflective questions at the end lead us to ask that. Do it. But one phrase that has stood out to me this whole semester is civil but bold. That was, I'll have to find who that was, but civil yet bold came Marsha, I think it was Marsha Barlow when she was talking.
Okay. She's our next question.
Yeah.
Okay, so Marsha Barlow spoke on persuasive speaking and writing. Did Wilbur and others exemplify any of Marsha's ideas, and how so? So I went back through the transcript of her talk and just pulled out some of the suggestions that she made. So this was my list. On the slave ship, when Wilbur was speaking to the elite group of people aboard, he showed them that he cared the most. And that was one of the suggestions she had, was to show people that you care, not in an arrogant way, but he definitely showed them that he had great care, where they were all sitting there having their slaves at home doing their work. But anyway, also on the ship, Wilbur used the way the opposition thought and reframed it to his point of view using his words and the smell of the ship.
Yeah.
When Wilbur was asked to explain the difference between appeasement and surrender, he reframed the general thought in the meeting. He said, "The difference between appeasement and surrender is merely a matter of time and perhaps 10,000 more young lives wasted for no reason." So he used their words but turned them around to his own benefit. Concession was used when Wilbur at the end said he was giving up the fight in slavery. That was when they had the law changed concerning what country a slave ship was from, when they changed the country flag. So I think he used concession even though he wasn't really conceding.
Yeah.
And then when the lawmakers met and barbs were thrown at Wilbur in the House of Commons, he often reframed them and threw them the barb right back, like where one guy said, half of the people are in favor of slavery, and Wilbur said, "No, 1 in 4. I wouldn't want to be your wife if that's what you consider 1 in 4 or something."
Yeah.
So he didn't do it in a negative way, but he would give it right back to him. He didn't own it; he just gave it back to him.
Yeah. I had a lot of similar thoughts. I felt like part of how he used persuasive speaking and writing, again, goes back to the visual aids, like the box the size of the berth that they were in. And that appealed to the core values that his opponents had, that he sought to understand what their values were and then not use, I'm trying to think how to say it without sounding like I'm saying he used those against them, but because Marsha Barlow talks about that. She talks about finding common core values and understanding what makes your opponent tick. So, and what is their morality? What are they basing things on? And he appealed to their sense of the sacred or sanctity, because most people back then had religious foundations for that, and care and compassion, and that he appealed to those within them, with people not as much in the House of Parliaments, although he did some, but more with the people that he had individual contact with. And they used the story of me, us, and now several times. Like, and I tried to go back and highlight those so I can include them, but when he showed him the ship and you talked about that, that's the story of me, us, and now, right? That's, he pulled it into an individual. They brought evidence. When the lawyer went back, James Stephen went back to Africa, and he brought back personal testimonials from the slaves, because I remember in the beginning arguments that when they first started, that someone in Parliament said, we don't hear any Black people complaining about this treatment. Just an awful thing to say, but that he took that and then brought back evidence with it to try and persuade them to change their thinking. Yeah. Those were the
Any
thoughts.
more? Okay.
I don't think so, no.
What role did the government, policy, and religious freedom play in the fight of the slave trade? And you can go ahead first on this one.
Okay, so the government played a role because their laws were decided and enacted from the House of Commons within Parliament. And those laws and the House of Parliament stood in the way of any change happening. because they don't have the same democratic process. It wasn't a matter of voting. It was the rule of law, not the voice of the people. And until they found a way to get Parliament to pass a law they were willing to pass, it was difficult to truly overthrow it.
Mm-hmm.
So they had that in. As far as religious freedom, that's an interesting question, because
I had no idea.
yeah, when we're talking about England in that time period, we're talking about the fact that you had religious freedom in so much as if you were part of the religion of the land at the time that the king was. That's the whole reason that all of our ancestors left and came. Mm-hmm. So I don't know that I can answer how religious freedom played a role in the fight, other than that their religious principles played a role in it, because across the board, at some point or another, they appealed to the fact that it was not humane and that God would not have them do those things. So maybe just the fact that they were free to believe that. I don't think, the economy was founded on slave trade and profits. So until they were able to get the economy to shift away from that, they weren't able to make any changes either. And political system. Yeah, that's the first part of it, that question.
And then do you see there, and I had basically the same things. I even went online and typed in religious freedom, England, Britain, and the slave trading. And it said that the fight was started by the Quakers.
Okay.
I don't know, I couldn't tell from the articles if they were talking about in America or.
Yeah.
It did anyway, but it talked about many different religions whose people stepped forward, because it said that Wilbur was
was he England?
He wasn't an Anglican. It was a evangelical.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, I think he was an evangelical. So obviously at that time, people had different religions because not everyone was evangelical. So my feeling was that having the freedom to have choose your religion gave people the freedom to speak their mind, and many Christians joined in the fight against slavery.
Yeah.
So pretty basic. So did you see their political system being pro-family? Why or why not?
No, they were not pro-family at that point, I don't think.
No.
I mean,
go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, well, I think it's hard to be pro-family when you're not even, the voice of the people is not respected or heard. That's the main thing for me, is that it was rule of law, not the voice of the people. That's the main, yeah.
And I put that I didn't see much evidence of any pro-family direction in the government. There was no concern for the families of the slaves that were brought and sold, because they talked about how they treated the children and raped the women. And so there was no consideration for that. Wilbur was pro-family, as he had great concern for the men, women, and children, and he had his own family. The political system was more concerned with their power and economy than they were with the family unit necessarily.
Yeah, I agree.
I feel like some of my answers I just keep repeating them in a different way for a different question. Okay, so do you feel that Wilbur used his time on Earth well?
Yes.
And you can go ahead on this one.
Yes, he did. I don't know. That's not a lengthy answer for me, other than that he reminded me of Brother Wilkes, if that's what we decided his name is. Mm-hmm. It's like he used every spare moment possible to be an advocate. Every spare moment. So
Well, and before he got into the slavery issue, it indicated that he had already been involved. I can't remember where in the movie it was said, but it seemed like they implied that had already been involved in other um, efforts because they knew he was a good speaker and he
yeah,
had connections. So from a very young age, and he said that he didn't think his friend could become prime minister because they were too young.
right.
And so you
Yeah,
knew from a very young age he had been involved. He
yeah,
never gave up on the fight to free the slaves.
right.
Between the times he could present a new bill, it seemed like it was a year or two between each time. And then when it finally did pass, it took several years for it to be enacted. But
Right.
um, and he continued the fight for injustice for the rest of his life. As it indicated at the end, he reached the hearts of the citizens of the country on education, healthcare, and prison reform, and he worked until his death for these causes.
Yeah. He
I
never
was
gave
just trying to get more bullet points, so I was kind of spreading it
up.
thin. But okay, so the next one, let's see, how did you see him showing the elements of consecration that Elder Christofferson spoke of? And there were the five: purity, work, respect for one's physical body, service, and integrity. And I actually just went to President Eyring's um, article and went through each of the sections and got a quote that I thought reflected Wilbur.
Oh, that's
Like
awesome.
for the first one, stubbornness, rebellion, and rationalism must be abandoned, and in their place, submission, a desire for correction, and the acceptance of all that the Lord may require. Which I thought, because at times Wilbur was stubborn, he didn't want to do it, but um, he had to give up all the stubbornness and everything to be able to accept what God wanted him to do. And so I just put a quote and then kind of expounded on it for each one of those.
Yeah, um for work, he was willing to do whatever it took. And again, he gave all of his time. I feel like that ties into the first part of the question. Did he use his time well? Falls into
Yeah.
work. He was willing to do it. He did it to the point of exhaustion. He did it to the point of putting in jeopardy his own health. For integrity, he would not give in to any other causes that didn't honor this cause. So when his friend Thomas Clarkson was talking to him about, rebellion with France, he said, "You can't talk about that around me. I am focused on this work. That does not match my cause. He wouldn't be showing personal integrity." For
Very
service,
devoted to it.
yeah. For service, he was willing to help anyone, anytime. And this was before he even started this advocacy for the slaves. That he fed people that came to his house, and he stopped to help people do things. And for his physical body, he had to learn that the hard way, but eventually he realized not only did he need to take better care of himself, but that he needed to avoid the laudanum, which is so sad that it was one of the only options they had back then. But he recognized that he was always going to have this health condition, and he had to find a way to deal with it that didn't hamper his ability to serve.
To think straight, yeah.
Yeah. So those are my thoughts.
Um, and what he was doing at the very beginning of the show was advocating for animals. And
That's right.
his future wife said that she had joined one of his groups or something in support of animals. So that was another way that
That's
he
why
was serving.
all those animals were all over his house all the time.
Yeah, the hare and the
Yeah.
eagle or whatever he said he had.
Yes. Well, and he
Um,
stops in the beginning to help that horse that's being beaten.
yeah. Yeah. Okay, any other profound thoughts or personal insights from the movie that are related to child and family advocacy? So you can start on this one.
Okay. There was one quote I was still looking for that I'm going to have to go back and find, but in our readings it talked about, and I don't think this is the exact wording, but seeing each other all as human.
Mm.
that was a profound part of his advocacy. And I don't know, I'm sure I'll find it, but in order to have the passion to advocate for families and children, it's important to understand and start from a basis of each other all being humans and being equal and deserving of good things. Because I think if we're advocating for other purposes like financial gains or other things, that it's not as effective. It doesn't have the same passion behind it or purpose. And this is where I also wrote down again, civil yet bold, which comes to that Marsha Barlow, and kind yet courageous. He got very passionate and he spoke with a loud voice sometimes, but he was a very kind man, and yet he was very courageous at the same time. Another personal insight was the importance of family and team support, and the story of me, us, and now, because he used that so effectively. It demonstrated how important it is to use that to help each other relate to what we're talking about.
And the only one of mine that's very different is I just put defeat is only defeat if you give up trying. Because there were so many times that he could have just thrown his hands up and said, this is never going to happen because of the type of people we have in the House Parliament or whatever, House of Commons, and just given up. But he took each one of those defeats and went forward with a new passion in some other direction sometimes. But
I agree. And I think that his wife was so good for that. I was thinking that he was giving up. At that point, he had kind of given up because, you know, while it was all kind of put on hold during their problems and wars with France, and people didn't want to stir the waters, he had, in essence, kind of given up, and she brought that spark back to him, reminded him of who he was and what he was passionate about. I think we have to do that for each other.
Yeah. What was your understanding of the doctrine of the family at the beginning of the semester, and then how has it changed? Just the basics. Family is an eternal unit ordained by God in his plan of happiness. It's within the family that children are nurtured, loved, and protected. The family unit continues into eternity if found on earth, and that husband and wife should respect one another. And the way it's been changed, not really changed, probably more just for strengthened, is that family is the main foundation of a healthy society. Within the family structure should be found happiness and safety. Parents have a responsibility to their children according to the proclamation. The definition of the family unit is under threat, and society would have the value of the family unit be done away with.
Yeah, this was the question I'm having a hard time. I feel like it's fluff.
Yeah.
In some ways. And here's why. Because you know what? My understanding of the doctrine of the family has not changed this semester.
Right.
It's been deepened, but I feel like my education at BYU Idaho has very clearly and succinctly prepared me as a family advocate to understand the doctrine and purpose of the family. We have entire classes on this topic. So I was like, what do I put that isn't just fluff? But yeah, and I think the thing that what has changed for me in this semester isn't my understanding of the doctrine of the family. It's my understanding of the importance of advocating based on my understanding of the doctrine of the family, if that makes sense.
And then the last one I haven't even started on. Picture your spouse and children, current or future, and write down some thoughts about how they will benefit from you taking this class.
Well, and so I'll share through the kind of thoughts I put. I haven't put them into full sentences, but I have children that have left the church, including just this last week. I have a son who said he's leaving the church, like leaving it. And if nothing else, this class has better prepared me to be able to intelligently and courageously, but kindly and civilly, be prepared to discuss with even my own children. If it never goes outside of that, I am, and my family will
Let's
be
report, yeah,
benefited, but it will go outside of that. And that we need to withhold our instant urge to take a side on an issue that is facing us in our society until we step back and try to understand the issue through the doctrine of the family and how it impacts the doctrine of the family. And then with that, like, I think of it like a pair of glasses, like a family focused lens. If I put that on and I look at anything going on anywhere in the world, I can see it with clear doctrine. And then I know better how to research and I know better how to, I keep going back to that Marsha Barlow stuff, but how to find common values with those that would be opponents or oppose something. And it's completely changed my ability to discuss some of these things with my children and or other people, and to prepare to discuss those things with them, because it isn't about who yells the loudest and who which, it's about finding the fact that we all have common core values, and that together, how can we work within those to make a difference? So those are my thoughts.
And this thought just came to me that no matter what we learn, what knowledge we gain, it always can benefit our families.
Yeah.
Whether it's psychology class or, child development, everything that I've taken within the family and marriage and family studies core degree have been things that I can use that would benefit my family.
I agree.
And for advocating.
Yep.
All of the knowledge that we have should be able to be applied in some way if it's correct and true knowledge that we gain. So I think that's a benefit to our families as well. And like mine, I don't know that I won't ever work in the field.
Yeah.
But certainly the things that I've learned, I have already shared a lot with my children. They probably get tired of hearing me, but just, things about the stage their child is in, or my family. I think there was a class on the proclamation, and we had to do a binder, and I made each of my children a binder, and I sent them the book that John Gottman wrote about 7 Principles of a Happy Marriage or something.
Yeah.
Anyway, so all of that, whether I go out into the workforce or not, whether in my church callings or with my family, have been used. So.
Yep. Well, and
okay.
Just real quick, I had this thought today. I was thinking about how even in the church as women, I hope that we never look at someone who's a General Relief Society president, and in particular in our day and age, they are women who are in the world in advocacy positions, and they are visible to the rest of the world with the good they do. But the truth is that Heavenly Father feels the same way about our personal advocacy, whether it's just with the young women we're serving or the nursery kids we're teaching or someone we're ministering to. He has the exact same feeling about that work as he does the General Relief Society president who's visiting other nations and going into homes. Right. It's the same thing.
It's not where you serve, but how you serve.
Yeah.
And so sometimes people in the church get really wrapped around that.
I know.
But you're right. It's whether we're advocating for families or for slave trade or whatever, as long as it's a worthy cause, then Heavenly Father's behind us, and we're just as important to Him as the prophets and apostles and the women in the church. Okay, well, I think I submit our link when I do the peer review. Is that what we're...
I think you have to email it to her. Let's see what it says.
Oh, maybe so.
It says, choose a person to record the meeting, and only one person needs to submit the link via email to her.
Okay.
And list the subject line, family 460-04, and your names. And this is on that opening page announcement.
Okay.
And then
I will email it. And then we email her our reviews of each other.
No,
I think that might be a place to submit it.
Yeah, that's submitted online. No, it's not. Okay, here we go. You will submit a peer review for your partner after the meeting. Use the rubric to grade the person as if you are the instructor. And then once you have filled out the peer review form for the rubric, email it to me with the subject line HOA peer review, your name. Okay.
Okay.
So it's all emailed to her.
All right. Well, good luck on finishing it. Is this your last one to get of your classes to finish?
No. I have a math final today. That's why I felt like I couldn't have this paper ready by today.
Yeah. Yeah.
Math final. And then, oh yeah, and I have another like 3-page paper to write today. So not too bad. Not too bad.
Well, this is my last one, and I'm so excited for the next week and a half till the next semester starts.
Yeah, no classes. You can enjoy your time with your kids that you're here to see.
I can finally. Yeah, I go back to Germany the day on that Monday that we start the next semester. So that'll work out good.
It's an amazing thing that you're doing. Continuing your schooling overseas, it's hard. I can remember packing my bags to come back and visit from Scotland and deciding which textbooks I absolutely had to take and which ones I didn't. And oh my gosh,
well,
so heavy.
And I didn't want to bring all my notebooks, and I thought, oh, I'm sure I'll need my psych notebooks. And I left my family ones in Germany. So anyway, I've got all this stuff online, so I'll just do the best I can. At this point, that's all I can do. So
that's right.
Well, and good luck on your other finals.
Thank you so much. Good luck in the next semester too.
Yeah, you too. Thanks for your time today, and I will get this submitted.
Okay, thanks, Linda.
Okay, thanks.
Bye.
Bye.